Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling in from. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started. In this webinar, we're going to be talking about the CLEER tool and how to use it to estimate and report greenhouse gas impacts from clean energy projects. We gave a webinar on CLEER last year, which some of you may have attended or seen on the web. We also gave one last week. This will be a repeat of that webinar, but we'll be covering some of the same thing, but we'll be doing some different examples. CLEER is part of USAID's Resources to Advance LED's Implementation project. ICF is implementing this project, which we abbreviate and refer to as RALI. And under it, we're developing a variety of tools and resources to support the planning and implementation of low-emission development. We will also be recording this webinar, and we'll be posting it on cleertool.org, as well as climate links. So if you do have colleagues who cannot join either webinar, they'll be able to access the webinar after we post it. Today we have two presenters. My name is John Venezia. I'm a principal with ICF. I'll be speaking today along with my colleague, Kevin Kirkle. ICF has a long history in the area of greenhouse gas accounting. We've been working with AID's Global Climate Change Office to create the CLEER tool, Clean Energy Emission Reduction tool, as well as the protocol, which we'll be talking about today. So here's the agenda that we'll be covering today. First, I'll provide a brief overview of the purpose of CLEER and how it can help aid and others estimate and report greenhouse gas impacts of clean energy activities. We'll spend the majority of today's webinar on the CLEER web tool. And I'll also mention some of the other protocols and materials available, such as the accounting protocol. Then we'll go through a tutorial of the CLEER tool. And at the end, we'll save plenty of time for your questions and leave you with some links and contacts for more information on CLEER. So this is the RALI project. Again, you can find the RALI project page and materials on climate links. The primary goal of our project is to provide tools and technical assistance to support implementation for low emission development. Why have we developed CLEER? Our main goal is to help the agency and missions better understand and communicate the greenhouse gas impacts of clean energy programs. As you all know, USAID is making significant investments in clean energy, but it can be difficult to understand the impacts of those investments on reducing or avoiding greenhouse gas emissions. So to help with this, the agency has established two indicators to measure and track the greenhouse gas impacts of programs. All operating units that receive direct mitigation funding are required to report greenhouse gas impacts from their programs. And so a main goal of the CLEER tool is to help missions and partners more easily report on these indicators. These are just some of the benefits for you and the agency to have a better understanding of greenhouse gas impacts from programs, such as conducting good monitoring, reporting, and verification, identifying high impact activities, looking at the greenhouse gas reduction potential of planned activities in various scenarios, and also better communicating around program impacts. So this here is the first greenhouse gas indicator. It's EG.12-6, and it's for reporting the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that are reduced, sequestered, or avoided in each fiscal year. So missions and implementers should only report values for this indicator if you have active projects that have reduced or have avoided emissions during the fiscal year. Here's the second indicator, EG.12-7. This is for greenhouse gas projections. So this is for reporting the amount of GHGs, or greenhouse gas emissions, that are expected to be reduced, sequestered, or avoided through the year 2030. So this is an expected future impacts. Missions implementers should only report on this indicator once for each project, and it should only be reported after a project reaches financial closure. So one of our main goals, again, is just simply to make reporting easier. The tool has a lot of emission factors and default data already programmed in there for you. We want operating units and partners to use standardized and consistent methodologies. And building on that, we really just want to reduce the amount of time it takes you to report, while at the same time increasing confidence in the numbers that are being reported. Some of you may be aware of the AFLU calculator, which is available for estimating and reporting greenhouse gas impacts with sustainable landscapes. So this is a similar calculator, but on the energy side. And then one last thing, even though today, we're going to be talking a lot about using CLEER for USAID reporting, it can be used by anyone wanting to measure and report greenhouse gas emissions from clean energy activities. And actually, over the past year, we've made a bunch of changes in the tool to better accommodate some of our non-USAID users, and are working with a number of organizations who are using the tool to help their members estimate impacts of clean energy activities. So while there is, some USAID terminology, we've tried to make it so that really anyone can easily understand and use the tool. We do have a variety of resources available through CLEER. First, there's a CLEER web tool. Again, this is the online calculation and reporting tool. We'll be providing a demonstration of it on this webinar. The CLEER Protocol contains the guidelines and the detailed methodologies. While we do want to encourage everyone to use the web tool, we are still including the CLEER Excel calculators on the website. This is mainly for those of you who might have some internet connectivity issues, but if you're wondering which to use, we want to strongly encourage people to use the online tool. We do have a helpline which you can reach us, and all of these resources are available at the cleertool.org website. So the CLEER tool will centralize and standardize the CLEER methodologies and equations for estimating greenhouse gas reductions, as well as the other data, so that users can aggregate, can view, and can export the information. It allows USAID contract and agreement managers to review and approve data from their partners so that they can report on the indicator. And again, as I mentioned, even though I'm going to be talking about USAID, it's publicly available for use by anyone. This is a screenshot. We'll get into a much bigger screenshot once Kevin goes through the demonstration. We've tried to design it to have sort of a simple, easy-to-use design. It does require users to enter basic activity and technology information, such as the country location, type of energy technology, the baseline or avoided fuel type. But there's a lot of default data that's embedded in the tool, so that with minimal data entry, you can actually use the tool to fairly simply calculate your greenhouse gas emission reductions. Also, CLEER stores all the data across projects and across years, so users can track progress over time. There are some reporting roles and responsibilities that USAID managers and partners should understand if they're going to use the tool for this purpose. I'd have to say, we've set the tool up for managers and implementers to use it in this way, but we've sort of seen people use it in a variety of ways. So these are sort of options if you do want to use the tool for collaboration. So after you create a login The next step for you is to create a project. So for USAID, this is an implementing mechanism. Basically, this is a single contract, agreement, or program under which clean energy work occurs. Typically tied to a set of funding and funded for a particular period of performance. So, managers or USAID contract managers can create a project and then assign the project to a group. So for USAID reporting, groups are operating units. USAID managers can also give partners and implementers access to these projects. Implementing partners should register in the system so that they can get access to those projects. Partners can either request access to an existing project, or you can create a new project if it's not already created by the manager. So you should just coordinate with your USAID manager so that you're not duplicating projects. But we wanted to give multiple ways for projects to be created depending on what roles you're playing. The next step is to create actions underneath the project. Actions are individual clean energy interventions or projects that lead to greenhouse gas impacts through different types of renewable energy, energy efficiency actions. So for example, this could be a new solar installation or an appliance efficiency initiative. Actions can be created by both USAID managers or partners. And then the next step is to add your reporting years. So users should enter the energy data. The tool will take you through a list of questions, and then it will calculate greenhouse gas impacts for a reporting year. Partners can submit the data for approval, and then the USAID managers can approve it. Again, it doesn't have to work this way, but it's set up to should you choose to do it. So if you are a USAID manager attending this webinar, please understand that both you and your partners have a role in handling the data in the tool. And if you're a partner, please communicate to your contract or agreement manager that they have a role as well. So we understand that users may have different kinds of data in their activities. You may know the amount of energy that your projects are generating or saving, or you may not. If you don't know the amount of energy generated or saved from your activity, such as amount of electricity or fuel, you can use one of the 3 general technology types highlighted in green here. But if you don't know the energy savings, but you do have data on the project, such as the capacity installed, the location, or other project details, you can enter your data using one of the 13 technology types in the tool. So as you can see on the screen here, the tool does cover a wide range of renewable energy technologies and also energy efficiency. We have recently added some new functionality to the tool based on some common requests from users. So now we've included functionality that allows you to calculate and display the energy generated from renewable actions, as well as calculate and display energy and cost savings from energy efficiency. We've also changed some of the terminology in the tool to clarify some things for our growing non-USAID user base. Implementing mechanisms are now called projects, and operating units are now called groups. The functionality is all still the same. It's just a change in the naming. And then last, we've expanded on the greenhouse gas projections functionality to give you some more options for customizing your projections. Again, users can generate projections of GHG impacts to the year 2030. If you don't know too much about your expectations, you can create a default projection. But if you do have some better data on what the expected sort of adoption or deployment is, you can create a customized projection. If you have assumptions about growth rates, such as could be expected from a policy. Also, if you do have a model or separate sort of Excel files that are are doing some of these projections for you on the energy side, you can directly enter those into the tool to get your greenhouse gas impacts. The tool will generate the projections. It'll divide them up into these three sort of reporting buckets for indicator 12-7. So on the screen here, you can see this is just a simple bar graph of a program that is expected to start in 2013, fully ramped up in 2016, and then I think fairly flat. So this is just installation with a little bit of a degradation of I think this might be from renewable energy, but it's a pretty flat one. And you can see there the three colors are the different reporting years that USAID wants to aggregate information. So last, before we go into the demonstration, I just wanted to mention the CLEER Protocol. This guidance document provides the accounting framework, all the underlying equations that support the web tool, that support the calculators. Each methodology in the protocol takes you through step-by-step on what data you need, what default data can be used, such as electricity grid emission factors by country, also what mathematical calculations to perform. So, it can be a helpful resource for anyone who really wants to better understand the methodologies and the calculations. All right, well, that's it for my part. Now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Kevin Kirkle, to take you on a tutorial of the CLEER tool.
Thank you, John. So, like you said, I'm going to take a moment here to walk you a bit through the tool itself, explore some of the functionality there. There's more in the tool than we're going to have time to cover over the next 20 or 25 minutes, but we want to give you an introduction to what the tool looks like, how you navigate as a user, and yeah, just give you sort of an introduction. And if you have any specific questions beyond what we're able to show, please feel free to submit the questions into the Adobe Connect Q&A box as we're going. And also, if you have any more in-depth questions, we're happy to follow up and connect with you offline from the webinar. So please let us know. This is really just an introduction. There's a lot more within the tool than we can cover here. So I'm going to exit out and navigate over to our browser here and navigate right to www.cleertool.org. And this will take us to the landing page for the CLEER tool. So this is our landing page. It has some basic information about the tool, some background. We have a recording of our webinar from this time last year. We will be recording this version as well and posting that online once we have a chance to watch through and make sure that everything is up to snuff there. We will let you know once that recording is available. So you can go back and review anything of what we've discussed today and what we will discuss today. So I have already actually logged into my account. If I had not, you would see a little box up here asking to either sign in or create an account. To create an account is very easy. You really just need an email address and some basic information about yourself. And then a username and password to sign in. So when you do sign in, it'll take you here to the dashboard. And the dashboard is really going to serve as the hub for all of the activity within the CLEER tool. You'll see that it's divided into 4 parts here: my projects, my groups, my alerts, and my reports. So we'll talk about each one of these a little bit, but these are really the basis of what we're going to be experiencing here within the CLEER tool. The first is my projects. This is where most of the action happens, so to speak. This is where all of the data will be housed at the finest level of granularity. It's where you will be entering data within projects, and within the actions underneath projects. We'll be diving into some of these that have already been created, as well as creating our own. So we'll take a deep dive into exactly what those look like. But what you're seeing here is for this account, these are the projects that the account is either an owner or a contributor for. So there are 4 of them here that they can explore. You see that we are the owner for each of these, and that there are a number of actions within each of them. As John mentioned, in the USAID world, a project will usually refer to an implementing mechanism, or we like to think of it as a sort of a discrete financing vehicle, but really you're free to use the hierarchy of the CLEER tool as best works for the data that you have and for your organization. It's really however you'd like your data to be organized and how you'd like it to aggregate to different levels. So we will see that individual actions are the lowest level. They will aggregate up into projects, and then we can aggregate those projects into groups. So that is the next level here. It's very similar. We will see only the groups that we are a part of. So here we are only a part of one group. We have the option to either join or create our own for both of these, but we will see the ones that we are a member of. The other piece is alerts. One of the key features of the CLEER tool is the ability to collaborate with your colleagues, your implementing partners, anyone who has a stake in the data and the reporting that you'd like to do using the GHG and energy information within the tool. So what this does is the alerts are especially for owners of projects and groups. So if you invite another colleague or partner to collaborate with you on the data within the tool, you will get an alert every time they make a change. That way you can review, maintain ownership, maintain version control there, and make sure everyone's on the same page with the changes that are being made. So you'll see there's a couple of different types of alerts here. User requests to join groups or projects, action approvals when data is changed, and notifications. Finally, we have reports. Reports exist to pull data out of the tool. Our reports are in Excel format. They allow you to take either the entirety of your data within the CLEER tool or some subset of that out at once, so that you can, if you need to do anything with the data offline, you can export it in this way. And you can create various types of reports based off of what type of data you're looking for. So that is our dashboard, the basics of it. What we will do now is, before we create a project and create actions to show you what the user experience looks like for a new user, first I want to jump into some existing data so you can see what it looks like once some of the data has been entered and we see a more complete picture of what the tool can do. So we are going to jump here into the CLEER sample project right on our dashboard here, which will take us in to the project level page in just a moment. And the project page is going to show us a little bit more of a detailed look at each project, a breakdown of what we've entered, and as well as sort of an aggregation of the data within it. So we're going to see a few things here on the project page. The first thing is basic details, some background information about the project, makes it identifiable to anyone looking through, just gives you that sort of basic background. I'm going to skip the graph for a moment to look at here. These are the actions within this project. So as I sort of touched on before, actions are the most granular level of data within the tool. What exactly defines an action is a little bit up to the user, but what is the key distinction for each action is that it has a unique country and a unique technology type. This is because a lot of the default data that we have within the CLEER tool is specific to a technology type, and it is divided by country. So in order to accurately use the default data within the tool, we need to break out each clean energy action into its components by country and by technology type. So here we see a few examples, and like I said, there's a few ways you can you can change that based off of your data and your personal needs. So for example, we have a solar photovoltaic system action here in Jamaica. And if you imagine that you had installed 3 separate solar arrays, that could be entered as 3 separate actions if you want to be able to look at the emissions associated with each one of those arrays separately, or if you have energy data from the 3 that you can aggregate into one total energy generation number, you could just enter it as one action for solar PV in Jamaica. So there's some flexibility there. It's really about what makes the most sense for you and how you want to be able to look at the cross sections of data. So those are the actions, and we get a few visualizations of the data that's been entered for each of these. So up above here, we see our annual graph. And so we see for each reporting year what the total greenhouse gas emission reductions were across all of the actions entered below. So there is a color corresponding to each of the actions and the data that's been entered for them. You can look at individual years and see the estimate for the emission reductions for each one. And again, this is for annual. And then down below, we have another graph for the projected emission reductions. So rather than looking into the past, this is looking forward. So we see from the first year that data is entered through 2030, we have projections. So this is broken out by year, and we will look at that on another page, but here it's aggregated to make it a little easier to digest. So we see buckets from the start year through 2020, and then from 2021 through 2025, and from 2026 through 2030, as well as a total number from the project start date through 2030. So that is the project page. And what we want to do next is actually jump into one of these actions specifically to look at some of the data that's been entered there. So what we can do is click here to jump into our action page. And you'll notice that this looks very similar to the project page. It really has the same structure, except now instead of looking at those 4 actions aggregated together, we're just looking at the one action. So we still have background information, an annual graph. We have our projected graph down below. You'll notice there's only one color in these because it's just the one action. And then in the middle here, instead of having individual actions broken out, we have individual reporting years for this one action. And you'll see as part of that that we have the reported greenhouse gas reductions, as well as the energy saved or generated, as well as cost savings where applicable. We do have a cost savings available for energy efficiency projects if the user has information about the cost of energy in their area. So this is what the action page will look like. We will shortly create our own actions so you can see how you get to this point of having data, but I wanted to give you a feel for what this looks like before we jump into the creation side. So with that, I will return to the dashboard so we can begin the process of going through. If you're a new user, you've just created an account, you come into your dashboard and everything's blank, you're totally new, what can you do? One thing is, if you've been invited to join by a colleague, a coworker, an implementing partner, they may already have some data in the tool. If that's the case, you should ask them where it's stored, and you can join existing projects or groups. You can click through, look them up, find the group, and then request to join it. And then you'll immediately have access to some of the data that's already in there. If, however, you're the first within your organization or within your project, what you can do is create a project here. So we'll go through that action. So we will create this project. It'll bring us to this page, and we can start entering some basic information about the project. So project name, we'll call this the September 12th webinar project. There's project ID and project number. Some of these fields are specific to USAID. So if you're unsure if what they mean. One thing, you can look here for these blue question marks. If you hover over them, it'll give you some information about what that field is looking for, what can be entered there, and what sort of information you might need. Also, we have indicated required fields with these red asterisks. So you'll notice that the project ID, project number, and value are all not required. So we're going to skip those for the moment, for the sake of time here, and we'll jump down to our next required field, which is the start date. We'll say that this project began in January of this year, and that the end date is January of 2020. The currency, again, this is something we can add if you want to calculate the cost savings associated with energy efficiency projects. We can enter in our currency here so that that's standardized across the project. We'll enter US dollars to keep things simple. You can enter a description if you'd like. And then you move down here. So for reporting, especially for USAID users, you can attach to the existing USAID operating units that have been populated into the CLEER tool. So if you scroll through, you notice that there is a group here for every USAID operating unit. There are also groups that have been created by users. So especially if you're working with a colleague on this, you can look through, see if they've created a group that you'd like to join this project to, and then you can select that here. Finally, you can add owners and contributors. So we are in the GCC training account at the moment, so we are automatically entered here as a project owner. You can add in additional owners or contributors just by typing their name in here. So I can add my personal account there as a project contributor. Anyone you're working with can be very quickly added in here as long as they have a CLEER tool account. So with that, we can save and view the summary. And this should take us through to our newly created project page, much like the one we were just looking at, but now, sadly, there's very little populated because we haven't yet added any data. So we'll notice there's a blank graph, another blank graph down here, and no actions. So what we'd like to do is add in an action and start getting some data populated in here. So we'll come right here and click Add Action. And this will take us to the page to start walking through the question pathway to enter our data. So first, we want to enter some background information about the action. We will call this an example solar action. So from our technology types here, we see the drop down that has the 13 technology types, as well as a few of our the general energy efficiency, general renewable electricity, and fuel switching. Those can be used if you already have energy or fuel data for certain types of projects, versus the technologies have a little bit more depth to them. When you're looking at this list, if you find that you're not exactly sure which technology is appropriate for your action, or if you're not sure if the technology you need is here, one resource you can use is up here at the top along the navigation bar. There's a Technologies tab. If you open that up, we've provided some clarification for each of these technologies about what real-world projects would correspond to each of these technologies, what's covered by each one. So you can read through here and get a sense for what type of data, what type of projects will be covered by each of these technologies, which would be your first guidepost for how to connect that to the work you're doing in the real world. If you still have any confusion there, if you have questions, or if you feel like the CLEER tool is missing something that you need, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're always happy to hear from people about this, to help them find the technology that's most appropriate for them, or to hear about ways that we could improve the tool in the future. So please don't hesitate to reach out on that front. With that said, we will select here a solar PV system for this example. For regions, we will pick Latin American and the Caribbean, and then we can really pick anywhere, pick Mexico for the moment. We can enter project partners and descriptions if we want to be adding any more detail there about the action. One thing you'll notice that as we've now selected a technology type, down below will populate a list of the data elements that may be required for estimating the greenhouse gas emission reductions for this action and technology type. You do not necessarily need all of these data elements, but this is the full scope of the data that may be asked in order to enter the data. So if you're not sure about going into it, if you have everything you need, you can scan through this list and see if you have some of this data before you enter into the tool itself, just to give you some guidance on where to start there. So with that, you'll say, what would you like to do next? We are going to save and estimate annual greenhouse gas emission reductions. You can also jump straight to the projected emission reductions, which is appropriate in some cases if you have not yet, if you're looking to plan for the future, check about the potential effectiveness of different pathways that you might go down, or a few other scenarios, where you're looking to the future but you haven't yet done the annual. You can jump straight into the projected. Generally, it's good to start with the annual and then project off of that data. So we're going to do that. We'll save and estimate the annual, and then click Save and Continue here, which will take us in towards the question pathway. So this question pathway allows us a few different options in order to enter the data we need in order to ultimately get to a GHG emission reduction estimate. So the first thing we're going to do is select 2016 as the reporting year. And then it asks us what type of energy is replaced by the renewable electricity system. So we can pick direct fuel consumption, grid electricity, electricity from a generator, or no previous energy. And as you click on one, you'll notice that there are different question pathways that emerge. So it's a sort of interactive experience that the tool will naturally guide you down a pathway based off how you answer the questions to get you sort of across the finish line of getting your greenhouse gas estimate. So if we select grid electricity, it will then ask us, do you know the amount of electricity generated by the system? And you can either say yes or no. If you say yes, you can very quickly get to an estimate. If you do not, we have some built-in for each technology type. We have some background data built in order to help you estimate the energy produced by the system based off of some of its installed capacity. So here it asks us how much generation capacity was installed or operational in the reporting year. We could say 100 kilowatts. Does the system have a tracking mount? No, it does not. And then for solar, it asks us, do you want to use a country average capacity factor or a site-specific capacity factor? So you can choose to select the country default data here, or if you, especially if you're in a large country and you know the exact site of where your installation is, you can choose a site-specific capacity factor and then actually enter in the specific latitude and longitude for your site. I'm not going to embarrass myself by entering latitude and longitude that doesn't exist, because that can be a little bit tricky, but you can enter this in here, and that would bring you through towards the end of this question pathway. What we're actually going to do is, if we jump back up here, one thing to point out, like we said, there's different question pathways, so we've gone pretty far down this one, but if you were to click over here into what type of energy is replaced by the renewable electricity system, you can actually just reset and look at the different pathways as well, see what other ways are available here. So again, there's a few options. We'll go back into the electricity, the grid electricity, And this time we'll say, yes, we do know the amount of electricity generated. And let's just say 1,000 megawatt hours. And then finally, how is the system connected to the electricity grid, either through central utility generation or a distributed microgrid? We'll say distributed microgrid for this case. And then you'll notice that when we click that, there's not another question that pops up, which means we've completed the pathway, and we can click Save and Review Results to get our estimates. So this takes us through to the Review Inputs and Results page. And you'll notice three things here. First, there's a summary of the questions and answers that we went through on the last page. There's a section for data assumptions. You can enter anything that it's always good to document assumptions, any assumptions that were done in order to arrive at this estimate, especially if you're working with colleagues. Great to have that documented and available to everyone. And then here's the good stuff, the calculator summary. So we see right here is our greenhouse gas reduction estimate, as well as our energy saved or generated. And above it, we see the values, the default values that were used based off of the questions we answered. So for this case, we just have emission factor and the line loss savings entered here. If you're curious where these default values came from, you can click on the default values words right there. It will take you to a list of where all of the default values within the CLEER tool came from. You can scroll through and learn more about each one of those. Also, a lot of these, like we had mentioned, are country specific, but if you know something that's more specific to your site, and you know there's, let's say, perhaps a study that was done in the region where you put your clean energy installation, then you can enter an alternate value here. So if we know for a fact that the local emission factor for grid electricity is actually 500 grams of CO2e per kilowatt hour, you can enter that here, click recalculate, and the numbers will update right here. And then if you don't want to do that, you change your mind, you can delete, click recalculate again, and it'll update right back to where it was. So this is our completed calculation for the annual. Once we're happy with what we have here, we can choose to either go back to the question pathway, save as a draft and return to the action details, or save and submit data. So this would submit to the owner of the project that this action is a part of. Since we are the owner of this project, it's just going to submit to ourselves. But that is a useful tool when you are, again, working with colleagues within the tool. Gives you that chance to interact. So now you'll see we have 1 year of data entered here in our annual graph. We've populated the 2016 reporting year. This is all within the action page that we just created. And then what we want to do is create now a projection based off of this. So we can scroll down here to this blank box and click to create emissions projection. And that's going to bring us through to a second question pathway for the projections. So the first thing, it'll ask us to select a projection start year. We can either project off of 2016 or off of 1 year beyond the reporting year. What's useful to have generally, it's good to just project based off of the data you've just entered. But if you're in a situation where your project was installed late in the year and you only have a couple of months worth of reporting data within that year, then it's good to start your projection from a year beyond that year that you've entered to make sure that you are projecting based off of a full year of clean energy production rather than just a couple of months. We'll say that we got a full year of data in there and project off of 2016. From here, you have two options. You can either create a default projection, which is based off of some of the default values we have within the tool and is a sort of a simple projection using assuming the energy profile stays similar and that there's just a little bit of technology degradation over time. You can also create a custom projection. This is one of our new features that allows you to sculpt a little bit more carefully how we expect the energy profile to change over time. So there's two main ways to do this. You can forecast using the annual rate of change, or you can enter the amount of energy reduced or avoided each year. So if you select this, it'll take you to a pathway that may look familiar based off of what we're just looking at. Ask you about the energy types, and then you'll enter an energy estimate for each year into the future. So that is one option. The other is to forecast using annual rates of change. So this will be rates of change from the reporting year that we had entered, the 2016. So we're saying, what is the expected annual rate of change of the action's energy impacts? So we'll say that it's a project that's going to scale up over time, and let's say it's going to grow by 10% each year. That's a lot of growing, but we're optimistic. What year do the energy impacts stop growing? So the project has funding, let's say, through 2025. At that point, it will stabilize. And then what year would you like your projects what year would you like to project your actions emissions to? Let's say that we don't want to look at anything past 2020, or let's say 2027. We don't want to go farther than 10 years in the future. And then finally, would you like to use the default technology degradation rate or input a custom technology degradation rate? Here we can use the default, and then we can save and review results. And this will generate our projection of our energy and emissions out through the year 2027, because we put that cap on it. And this will take a second to do all the math, and then we'll get this cool graph showing starting in our year, growing 10% a year minus some technology degradation, leveling off at 2025, and then stopping in 2027. You'll see the colors to divide into the buckets we looked at earlier, and those buckets are displayed here. You can see those summed emission reductions over the green, orange, and gray buckets, and then a summary of the projection details down below. At this point, you can submit your projections for approval, and this will bring us back to the action page, where we will now see a complete action with our annual estimate, and now a projection graph and some estimated projection numbers here. So that's the basics of the tool. There's certainly a lot more. I'd be happy to explore more with people offline if they have in-depth questions. We are, however, going to turn it over at the moment for Q&A. If anyone has any questions, hopefully we've had some submitted in the Q&A box. And I'm going to turn it over to John to answer a couple of those. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Kevin. So yeah, this is John again, just wrapping up here. We have a couple of questions that have come through. So I'll just start with the first one. There's a question on calculating greenhouse gas emissions from electricity consumption depends on local grid emission factors. So how does the CLEER tool comprise such data? So yeah, thank you for this question. This is a good one. We use country-specific grid emission factors, and these are also marginal emission factors, so they take into account both the build margin and operating margin, essentially what is the electricity that is most likely to be displaced as opposed to the grid average. I think the protocol talks more about some of the definitions behind these, so you can look there. But yeah, we use marginal grid emission factors updated through the latest CDM projects. There's another question on can the CLEER data from the CLEER tool be used to can be extracted for direct reporting to our own organizations. And yes, so there's a reports tab that I think we showed sort of right at the beginning. There's a couple sort of export to Excel, so you can get all of this data out from the tool into Excel, so you can manipulate it and use for whatever purposes you like. Hold on, some questions coming in here. Can you edit action information after it's created? Yes. So you can you should be able to just go into your action and then click on edit. So see here we're in the reporting years, so you can edit the data in reporting years. Up here you can see the button edit action. So if you want, you can click that button. And it'll go in and we can edit the action type. Pretty much some of the data we can't enter because the action has already been associated with a certain technology, but you can enter things like you can rename it, the project partner description, and then but again, some of the things you can't because these factors have been used in the action. And honestly, if you have a different, you probably wouldn't be editing the things like location and the type of project anyway. You would just, you could just delete this and do a different action. Another question is, can you express energy savings in gigajoules instead of kilowatt hours? The tool right now outputs the energy savings, at least for electricity, in kilowatt hours. So you would need to convert that into gigajoules using the typical conversion factors. And see, I'm looking at maybe one more coming in. There's a question on whether CLEER conforms with international protocols. And so yes, the CLEER conforms with the IPCC guidance as well as the WRI protocols. In fact, has earned the WRI built on GHG protocol seal. So that's we've gone through the process to get this certified so that you can be sure that these are accepted methodologies and practices. Okay, well, I'm being given the signal that we don't have any more questions. Once again, I just wanted to thank everyone for joining. I hope you found that informative and helpful. Again, we do have a CLEER helpline. So if you are working with the tool and you run into any issues, feel free to reach out to us. Again, so I hope this can be a useful tool for those of you who are using it, and as well as to those of you who are new to the tool. All right, thank you all very much. Again, have a good morning or good afternoon, good evening, where you are.